My name's Allison Collins, and I'm the Adult Public Programmer here at the Vancouver Art Gallery. I'm really pleased to welcome you here tonight at the first of our Reading Ian Wallace speaker series. Tonight's talk and the 3 discussions that follow it over the next several weeks have been supported by the Canadian Art Foundation through its International Speaker Series. I want to thank both the director, Ann Webb, and the outreach manager, Christine Shaw, who's here with us tonight, for their great enthusiasm in supporting lectures across the country. Thank you for being a co-presenter for this series, and I also want to acknowledge the BMO Financial Group who supports these speaker series for the Canadian Art Foundation. I just want to also remind you and let you know that we'll have the next 3 speakers in this series coming up. So the next one is Christine Poggi in 2 weeks' time on Tuesday evening, February 29th. And then January 29th. I'm getting way ahead of myself. February 5th, we'll have a conversation with Stan Douglas regarding film and Ian Wallace's practice, as well as February 19th with Victor Burgin, which will be a conversation about photoconceptualism. So we're really looking forward, and we know that you're going to be at those as well. I just wanted to give you a quick forewarning that we are experiencing a little internal Vancouver weather here in the pavilion tonight. So if you feel a little drip, don't be alarmed. But before we begin, we'd like to just welcome Christine Shaw up to the podium. She's going to say a few words, and then we'll turn things over to the chief curator here, Dinah Agaitis, to get us going. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Allison. It's an absolute pleasure to be here on behalf of the Canadian Art Foundation. We wish to congratulate you, Ian and Dinah, on a remarkable retrospective exhibition. As the exhibition teaches us, Ian Wallace has been a seminal figure in contemporary art for 4 decades. A search through the archive of Canadian Art magazine also begins to reveal something about the artist, the critic, the art historian, and the pedagogue. In Peggy Gale's 1997 article entitled Outsiders In, she discusses how, in a world of power and commodity, the photograph itself was commonly undervalued, seen as a mere tool. But in Ian Wallace's work, the intellectual, educator, and flaneur notates the city and history. Ian Wallace's photo-based art has proved influential, both for its material innovation and for its fusion of aesthetic and political content. In the summer of 1998, on the 5th anniversary of the event it records, Clayoquot Protest was featured on the cover of Canadian Art magazine. The work is almost 20 years old, but the issue remains prescient. Trevor Mahovsky's polemical article entitled Radical, Bureaucratic, Melancholic, Schizophrenic was published in the summer of 2001. In it, he creates a map of the discursive community formed by Ian Wallace, Jeff Wall, Ken Lum, and Roy Arden, who shared concerns of the relationship of text and image, theory and practice, and the figure of the artist as academic. Mahovsky points out how much of the writing produced by this textual community concerns moving forward from past models of the avant-garde of the university without destroying them, and how models can be produced that are not so rigid that they cannot be reimagined. In her 2010 feature article on Ian Wallace and John Baldessari, Jessica Morgan, curator at Tate Modern, captures Wallace's personal teaching style when she writes that he occupied the role of intellectual as much as that of artist, implicitly arguing for the importance of literature and scholarship within a craft-based education. And Michael Turner recently wrote in his fall 2012 article, the artist-scholar interface is key to understanding the large-scale photo-based work and attendant pedagogical apparatus that took hold in Vancouver in the mid-1970s and continues through Wallace's students, a group that includes Rodney Graham, Ken Lum, Stan Douglas, Roy Arden, Jeff Wall, Damien Moppet, Ron Torrata, and Stephen Shear. Wallace's pedagogical impulse has arguably been responsible for the formative experiences of generations of artists. All of this proves not only the important historical depth of Wallace's practice, but also its continuing contemporary resonance. It is in recognition of this achievement that we are delighted and honored to co-present with the Vancouver Art Gallery the Reading Ian Wallace series. The Canadian Art Foundation gratefully acknowledges BMO Financial Group for their continued support of our International Speaker Series, without whom we could not engage in such important partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine, for those very thoughtful words, and we really are grateful for the ongoing support of the Canadian Art Foundation. I might just move this computer a little bit. Hope that's okay. By way of introducing Ian Wallace, whom most of you probably know, I thought that I would reflect a bit on the process of organizing his retrospective exhibition, Ian Wallace, at the intersection of painting and photography, which of course is the occasion for tonight's talk. It was such a privilege to work on this large-scale exhibition, mostly because the show emanates from a brilliant and generous artist. Over the 4 years of developing the show and accompanying book, myself and Kathleen Ritter, who as associate curator brought so much energy to it, in the research phase, we met weekly with Ian to become familiar with his work. He told us about his practice chronologically, as an art historian might, beginning with the 1960s, when Ian was an aspiring artist, even in high school, and by 1965, as an undergraduate, was already exhibiting at the Vancouver Art Gallery. As a UBC student, he was connecting with the beat poets, jazz musicians, experimental filmmakers, and other members of Vancouver's progressive cultural scene. It took us 3 meetings to get through the 1960s, in large part because Ian was so generous in explaining the history that led up to that time, as well as the context, both locally and internationally, that affected the development of his ideas. As we moved into the 1970s, we learned how Ian's unbridled curiosity took him to the great art center of London for a few years, and just as significantly, led him back to the peripheral edge of this continent, where he began making works about Vancouver. And many of his early black and white photos and the large-scale hand-colored panoramas that are in the show downstairs were made during that exciting and generative period. It was also the time when Ian began his 26-year tenure at the Vancouver School of Art, where he taught the principal courses on contemporary art and theory, and I mean really contemporary, with regular analyses of work in the latest issues of Art Forum and Flash Art. He also organized a seminal program of visiting artists by convincing the art school administration to use the equivalent of one instructor's salary to invite visiting artists from throughout North America, done in collaboration with UBC and SFU. In 1980, when I enrolled in Ian's infamous Art Now class, I saw firsthand the lively debates as well as the friendships that emerged between like-minded artists from here and elsewhere. In the 1980s, they brought a growing recognition of Ian's work through exhibitions across Canada, in New York, and in Germany. It was a time when Ian not only made art and still taught full-time, but also wrote about and occasionally curated exhibitions in order to make visible and to consolidate ideas around photoconceptualism that were becoming identified with Vancouver's vigorous art scene. Significantly, it was also the period when Ian returned to painting and juxtaposed the painted monochrome with the photograph, a synthesis that consciously activated the tradition and history of painting in these works on canvas, with the image being delivered through the technically expedient tool of the day, the camera. The 1990s were a time of consolidation, especially about the subjects of the studio, the museum, and the street, that have continued to be important aspects of Ian's production to this day. And in the 2000s, he has produced ever greater complexity in the work, and with it has come an escalation in recognition from museums, collectors, artists, and gallerists in North America and abroad. Especially after his retirement from teaching, he's been extraordinarily prolific, producing an amazing body of work that stands as his unique exploration of what is possible in an image. So in this exhibition, we evoke 45 years of production through several recurring motifs that Ian has returned to repeatedly: the monochrome, the cinematic image, the text, the street, the museum, the studio. Through this body of work that combines the abstract with the real, the conceptual with the pictorial, he leaves us, the viewers, to make sense of the sensorial and political fullness of the everyday world that he presents to us. I am very pleased to welcome an artist, a teacher, an art historian, a writer, and a friend to many whose conceptual rigor has paved the way for the generation after him, and whose prominence here and elsewhere is still growing. Please welcome Ian Wallace.
Thank you very much for those excellent introductions. The talk has almost been given to us already, actually. Now I just have to fill in the pictures. Thank you, everybody, for coming. What a great crowd. And there's a lot going on tonight, a lot of competing activities, including a opening by Neil Wedman at the Charles Scott Gallery in Granville Island. And I'm going to buzz down there after this is all over and see if I can catch the end of it. Can everybody hear me all right? So just, our techie out there, just crank me up if it seems like I'm not coming through. Thanks. Well, I thought, there's, another thing. I just want to thank everybody. I just, really what makes this exhibition really so worthwhile to me is all the fantastic comments I received from from strangers, from friends, from other artists, etc. This like years of work and everything. You do a retrospective exhibition, you wonder if it's all going to pan out in the end. And I really appreciate the encouraging comments from everybody. So I'd just like to start with that. And tonight, I thought, there was one time when I used to do talks about my work years ago, decades ago it seems, and in fact it was decades ago. I could talk about everything in an evening, in an hour, and it would be done. I can't, even this exhibition is really a selection of work. I like to go on in detail about the works and such, but we just don't have the time for it. So I want to move through fairly quickly. And the way I decided to present my work this evening is to start with the work at the very beginning and look at the work most recently done since the exhibition has opened, as a matter of fact. So we're going to see some some of the beginnings, which I'm sure some of you who hasn't seen some of this early work are probably wondering what its role in the exhibition is and where it's coming from. Some of it, I think, my earliest work is difficult to explain, difficult to rationalize, but it's there. I still stand behind it, and I'm quite happy. I'm very satisfied myself, personally, anyways, to see this early work on the wall, and it still holds up. That's already, again, something that makes a show like this worthwhile to me as the artist. So what I'm going to do is start with looking at some of this very early work, my early monochromes, and really just only in the years from about 1967 to 1970 at the latest. That passage, you might say, from monochrome painting to some of my earliest photography. I'm going to emphasize some of my influences because I think that's a fair and interesting thing to do. I'm going to look at the work by other artists who I was looking at closely. I can't mention them all, and there's many artists, and I'm kind of I reach out in all directions at once, as has come up in some of the descriptions of the introduction. I'm very interested in literature, philosophy, art history, some of the more radical aspects of contemporary art. I'm interested in prehistoric art, Renaissance art, all forms of visual culture, music, et cetera, So all these things can go into the mix. So we're going to be hopping around in different directions and somehow trying to make sense out of what I would think of as really my early struggles, my early experimental period to do a serious work of art. And at this time, in the 60s, what I was doing wasn't necessarily accepted. I didn't get a lot of support necessarily, even from the people that I was expecting it from or looking for it from, including my artist friends. We're all pretty tough on each other. This first picture I think of is one of my primary motifs in my work. It's about a subject that continues to today. And down there is a version of this work that is really a part of the Vancouver Convention Center collection. I offered it when I was asked to contribute to that collection, a large version of this particular photograph, which was normally only kind of a fairly normative size. It's a photograph taken in 1970, in spring of 1970, at the corner of Hastings and Seymour Street. You probably recognize what is now the Wasps Center for Dialogue here. This intersection here was right below a second studio that I had in the old Empire building, right at the corner of Hastings. And some of you might remember the British Boot Shop, which was in the downstairs level of the old Empire building. It's been since torn down, and it's now an office building. I show this picture at this moment right now because these three windows right here were the windows of my studio that I had between 1967 and 1970. I moved to the Empire building in 1970. So I'm just showing you, in a sense, the ambience of the street. And I'll come back to this picture to describe it in some detail later. This is early monochrome, a black monochrome with yellow in this particular case. And it's sitting against the wall in that studio we just looked at, the one that is in these three windows here. I had a fairly good-sized studio for $40 a month at that time. Paula Ross Dancers had the space, the three spaces next to me. Upstairs was David Mayers, and at the back of my space was artist Bodo Pfeiffer. And also Pierre Coupé at one point also shared the space in this building here. Pierre Coupé, painter, lives in West Vancouver. You might know him. This is what I was working on, and what I'm going to do is kind of go through some of this work and show where this comes from. Why was I doing work like this in 1967? I tend to describe this as like creating a blank slate, the 0 degree of painting, starting all over again. I had been included in two previous exhibitions at the Vancouver Art Gallery in 1965 and 1966. I was starting to get a little bit of momentum with doing a kind of a form of kind of abstract painting that, for me, I just felt like it was going in the wrong direction, had to jettison that work and start all over again. And where I started was I picked up on, in spring of 1967, I picked up on this, making a move towards a really kind of formal, reductive, monochrome painting, just starting from scratch, in effect, as to what a painting could be. These works, these monochrome works, in spring of 1968, summer of 1968, were shown in an exhibition at Simon Fraser University, curated by Marguerite Penny, who also wrote the review for Arts Canada magazine. The original Canadian Art was published in August 1968, and the painting that we just saw, this one here, is the painting that's reproduced, oh, there we are, on the wall in the reproduction here. Marguerite Penny, I thought, wrote a really, really beautiful review on the work, and also it was a two-person show with Dwayne London as well here. We see Dwayne London's plexiglass pieces. Very beautiful work, by the way, very, very rigorous work on the outside of the Simon Fraser Theatre in the summer of 1968. Marguerite Penny, in her review at the end, let's see if I can read it. Yes. They are gazed upon, passed by, give pleasure, displeasure, have life, and in turn affect their surroundings. As talismans, they give confirmation to his own identity, credibility to the myth of his own existence. Which, obviously, as I was an ambitious young artist wanting some attention, and and she gave it to me. So, but I really like I interpret it in an existential way, and that's really how. Sorry, this is what I want. How I identify. This is a slide of that very painting or that reproduction we just saw in the magazine. I see these works as markers, in effect, that just mark my presence in space in a literal way, very literal way, and I'll come to that again in a second. Now just to look briefly at some influences. I'm going to move quite quickly through some of this. At this time, as an art history student at UBC in 1967, I was, my master's degree thesis was on the evolution of neoplasticism in Piet Mondrian, 1910 to 1920. So I was very interested in Mondrian's work and examining how he made the transition from impressionist landscape painting to pure abstraction. And my challenge was to understand all the decisions that he made in doing that and to absorb the knowledge that I got from examining his work and incorporating it into my own ability to rationalize, I suppose, and to make new work. This is a schema. This schema actually was drawn out fairly recently, but it follows the exact concept that I had for the monochrome paintings, which was a suite of 30 paintings. They were never completed in 1967, and I've only just recently completed the series. I'll explain that again, how that happened. The concept of the series of the monochrome, it's very, very what I call concept pieces, was of paintings that involve the three primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. Of course, those are the three primary colors of Mondrian's classic neoplastic paintings, with white, gray, and black, the three kind of reductive tonal colors, not chromatic, but just tonal colors. Each painting having one of the main colors as the center one, and each of the other colors as the framing of it. Of course, say a red painting, a red monochrome couldn't have a red border, so you only have 5 of those since there's the 3 colors. Altogether, it made a series, or makes a series that's now completed, of 30 paintings. I only finished about 1/3 of the paintings in that time, and except for one that I know still exists, all the rest have been destroyed over the years. Here's one of the paintings, black monochrome with red, hanging in the Simon Fraser Theatre in 1968. This is blue monochrome with white hanging in the back stairwell of the Simon Fraser behind the theater in 1968. I guess as a kind of a maybe immature but a bit of a radical gesture at the time. Remember, this is 1968, the year of many political upheavals and challenges and occupations of the universities and such. The concept of the show, taken both by Dwayne London and myself, was they wouldn't exhibit in the gallery, but we would exhibit all through the university building. In other words, back stairwells, hallways. Dwayne exhibited on the outside. He put his bisected plexiglass panels in the exterior of the theater, for instance. It was a beautiful concept, I thought. I like this one here, the blue monochrome with white hanging near the exit sign, like exit painting, sort of, or no exit painting. This one is the only one that remains, and it's in the collection of Helga Pakasar and Robert Klein. I gave it to them as a wedding present a number of years ago. Where did I get these ideas from? They came from many places, from magazines, from looking at other artists, being inspired by local artists, and I wished I had some reproductions of their work. Glenn Toppings, an artist that's not discussed much anymore, but I really liked his work. I met him when I was in high school. I was at up Indian Arm at a kind of a summer camp, and somebody said to me, "Oh, Ian, you're an artist. There's an artist that lives really nearby. You should go and meet him." So I kind of walked up the trail, and it was Glenn Toppings' house. He wasn't home, but his wife showed me through all the work that he had in his studio. He got back, and he was really mad that she was showing his work to me in the studio. But we became friends after that, and I really like his work. Roy Kiyuka, Gordon Smith Shadbolt, all of the local modernists, and B.C. Binning in particular, because B.C. Binning, I always hold tremendous respect for him because he took such a chance on me. He gave me my first serious job as an art historian at UBC when he was the head of the Fine Arts Department in 1967. I didn't even finish my master's thesis, and he gave me the job. I thought that was amazing. Anyway, so I really had to live up to his confidence in me, and I think I did. I really had a great time at UBC for the years I was there and after, of course. This is a work by Barnett Newman. I just want to touch upon an important exposure that I had as a young artist and why it is really important for today, for really the cutting edge of today's art to be exhibited and visible and present in front of young people today. This is the exhibition that I saw at the Seattle World's Fair of 1962. I was 19, And these work by Barnett Newman was in the exhibition, and Frank Stella, Getty's Tomb from 1959 was in the exhibition. I can't say that I fully understood these works when I saw them, but I knew that it was out there. You know, I knew that this work, stood as something to pay attention to, that's why even like in my exhibition here, like I take a group of teens through. They might not understand what I've done or what it is, but they see something there. They see something that grabs them, and they'll remember it in the future. And that's what happened to me. It took me a while to really catch up. This was Elvin Balkind, who used to be he passed away. He was the director of the UBC Fine Arts Gallery, and he was very encouraging to me and all the artists of my generation at the University of British Columbia in the 60s and on. And he, in 1967, was taking a group of his curatorial students on a tour of the museums of the East Coast of the United States and invited me to join them. And I was, of course, had been hired to start teaching that fall at UBC and teaching a contemporary art course program, a curriculum that I put together for UBC. And I followed them all around on that trip as kind of an auxiliary member of the group. And one show that really, and one experience that really blew me away, and I think was a big influence on my work and where I was going at that point, was seeing this work by Dan Flavin called Pink Out of the Corner, done in 1963. And this is a show from spring of 1967 at the Corcoran Museum in Washington, D.C. Here's the catalog for it. It was curated by Barbara Rose. And I just want to, the verticality of the monochromes, etc. I think this is this image of verticality that exists in a lot of my work and in the color bands in a lot of my work possibly comes from this. Because the exhibition had works by Carl Andre, Don Judd, etc., all the minimalists. And it was a fascinating show, but I walked into this back room that looked like there was nothing there. And I was like, oh, okay, more nothing art, right? Okay. So I walk into the back room, and then there was all there was in the room was this one piece in the corner. And it just like, whoa, it just hit me. I don't know, maybe I was just open and ready for it. And it's been in the back of my mind ever since. Through that years of 1968, I was still trying to deal with monochrome painting, within the rigid frame, etc. I won't go into a lot. There's a lot of other theoretical details I could go through, but I'm not going to do that. We don't have time for that this evening. But this is one of the last paintings, the last monochrome paintings that I did as a pure monochrome at this time in 1968. It's just a monochrome with an orange center. It's one of my favorite colors. This kind of, glowing kind of construction site, caterpillar orange, I guess you call it, like Caterpillar tractors, etc. But I felt that I'd really come to the end of this, and I had to kind of move in a new direction. So I was, and this sounds like a silly anecdote, but it's true. I was building a stretcher frame to work on another painting like this with 2x2 stretcher bars on the floor of my studio. And in the hammering of the corners of the bars, I hit my thumb and was not too happy with the pain that I experienced with that and felt there must be another way. That's a kind of a trivial explanation, but that's kind of like how I came to my epiphany. I said, like, these wooden bars look just fine on the floor the way they are. Why do they have to be nailed up and canvas stretched over them and painted and go on the wall? They look just fine where they are. So I started playing around with the bars of wood on the floor and seeing them as, in effect, sculpture of deconstructed painting. The next step, here's a picture of me in that studio, by the way, that was the 3 windows next to the Wasps Center for Dialogue. Pardon the hair and the geeky glasses, but, and the Oaxaca sandals I see I got on there. I was really a wannabe hippie beatnik, I guess, at the time. Here I am, kind of a photograph of me arranging. My wife is in the corner there. I don't know who took the photograph. It must have been a friend that was visiting or something. One of my monochrome paintings is obviously sitting on the trestle there. And I'm kind of arranging the bars of 2x2s again, and 2x4s. And on the surface, for the skin of painting, because really these wooden constructions were deconstructed paintings. So the painting still had to have the skin of the, of the canvas that would go over the frame. So instead of using canvas to go over the wood, because I wanted to reveal the structure underneath, I went to Army and Navy and bought rolls of this transparent polyethylene, and then used that as the skin of these paintings, which, sculptures, I guess you'd call them, sitting here. And here's some more contemporary slides from 1968 showing the plastic laid over the wooden bars, of which we have an example in one of the galleries here of work of this period. I did a show with Darcy Henderson at the UBC Student Union Building Gallery. It was a show curated by Chris Dikiakos and Ilias Pagonis, who were curating at that time and later on some incredible shows. And I really appreciated the support from those two. They were both young students of mine, actually, in my art history classes at the time. So maybe they were just trying to get a better grade. I don't know. And they deserved the best grade, and I think they did get the best grade. Christos Dikiakos is still a fantastic artist and a very good friend, and an artist worth paying attention to, I think. Here's another arrangement of this wood. This is on the floor of my studio. I don't have any slides of the UBC exhibition from that handy here. This is this piece, by the way. Lucy Lepard in the in 68, 69 was visiting Vancouver to visit mostly Ian Baxter, who was a teacher of mine and an influence, by the way. I'm bringing Baxter's discussion to Ian Baxter and Ingrid Baxter and any Think Company will come in a minute. She was very, very interested in this kind of work that was happening in, dealing with deconstructed painting. She was invited to curate an exhibition at the Montreal Museum of Art in the spring of 1969. And she knew about this work and knew about me, invited me to submit a work and participate in that exhibition. I sent a letter to her with a description of this piece saying get 5 lengths of 2x10, 12-foot length, or 10-foot lengths of beams, and some polyethylene, and assemble the sculpture. Like, I just did it by letter. I didn't assemble the sculpture myself. So I really like that. Of course, conceptual artists at the time were doing, including Ian Baxter with his telex pieces, were sending out artworks by information alone. And this was my one way that I kind of entered that kind of practice. In the back, we have a line across the floor. That black line is a piece by Bill Vazan, the Montreal artist, who was doing lines like whirl lines. It took the latitude of that particular spot and cut a line right through the gallery with black tape on the floor. Ian Baxter had an interesting piece. It was just like little black tickets or notices on the wall saying, please talk to the guards, like entertain the guards with some conversation. And that was his piece. My piece was kind of more object-oriented, as I still am. In the fall of 1969, just a sec, got to get my dates right here. Yes, sorry, it would have been in the fall, December of 1968. Yes, it would have been December 1968. I went to New York. I used to go to New York and photograph exhibitions to get the latest information and then bring it back and use it in my classes. And one exhibition I saw that really impressed me was a show called Nine at Castelli, the Uptown Castelli warehouse. He had a rough warehouse in which he showed, and this is an early piece by Bruce Nauman, in which he had a sound tape piece onto an iron bar. There's a early Richard Serra, the prop piece leaning against the wall made of lead, as we see here. So this work was done exactly in conjunction with the work that I was doing at this time here. Harold Seaman, who did a very important exhibition called When Attitudes Become Form in the spring of 1969, had also seen this show and invited almost all the artists in this show to participate in that exhibition. of course, I wasn't a part of that because I was still an unknown provincial artist out in the outback of Vancouver at the time. Here's an Art Forum magazine with the lead splash by Richard Serra from that Nina Castelli show. Really an amazingly radical, influential exhibition for all artists that were looking for a way to make the shift, as I was at the time. And here's my slide of the Richard Serra piece as it was installed in the Castelli exhibition in the fall of 1968. Another artist who was working in this kind of very loose and open way with materials, metaphorical artist. An artist actually was originally a poet, very involved with the poetry movement, was Robert Smithson, who was here in 1969 and 1970 and did the famous glue pour outside. In fact, this photograph is by Christos Tikiakos, who was present when the piece was being done. Lucy Lepard, the critic, is the person standing here. This is Robert Smithson, Ilias Pagonis, and Dennis Wheeler is standing in between the two of them. And they just finished dumping a huge barrel of glue, industrial glue, over the edge of an embankment off Chancellor Boulevard at UBC. That embankment is now lush with growth, so I guess the glue had lots of good gardening nutrients in it. I don't know. That summer after the, pardon the narrative here, I think it's, you know, it's okay to tell a story. After the summer of that spring exhibition in Montreal in 1969, I was with my wife and my son, who was only 5 years old at the time. And I wanted to go to Mexico. I wanted to see some ruins. We didn't get to Mexico, but we ended up driving the whole circumference of the United States. And when I got back, I like to joke that I had white line fever, you know, from the highway. And I did this piece out in the Dollarton mudflats. A friend of mine, Tom Burrows, the artist Tom Burrows, was living as a squatter in a house on the Dollarton mudflats in North Vancouver, the Maplewood mudflats. And in front of his house on low tide, I did the sculpture of 5 12-foot pieces of shiplap painted white. On this here, I had a 30-foot length of white cotton that I sprayed a red line down the center. So I was really into lines at this time. And, you know, as a kind of like the Barnett Newman piece. This is a Barnett Newman with a white line down it, but without the surrounding canvas in effect. We showed this, this piece has got shown. The white line couldn't be shown as a line, so I showed it as a kind of a platform. I got the boards in the gallery as a platform. It was shown at the Beauchy Gallery, the old Beauchy Gallery that's now in the place of the Orr Gallery on Hamilton Street, which has been an art gallery continuously for about 50 years, I think at least. The red line was shown rolled up like a toilet paper on a roller that I built. And so if you wanted to see it, you had to pull it and walk it out across the gallery floor and then roll it up again. So it was a hassle piece. I met at this time Bill Vizin in Montreal, and he sent me 1,000 one-inch lines. For almost 3 years, he sent me a one-inch line every day. And here's one. I'd moved to London in the meantime and then back, and so his postcards were chasing me all over the place. And this one found me back in Dollarton Highway. This is the actual address of the squatters' site on the mudflats at Dollarton, off Dollarton Highway, and there's the one-inch line, number 519. I saved up all these postcards, by the way, and ended up giving them back to him recently, and they're in the traffic show downstairs. In late fall of 1969, no, this would be January 1970. That's when the 955,000 show was done by Lucy Lepard at the Vancouver Art Gallery here. This is the setting up of a work by Carl Andre. This is Ian Baxter from Anything Company standing in the foreground. That looks like Julius Pagonis. I can't identify the others. Yeah. And we're setting out the 3-foot blocks of 12 by 12 inch fir in a line, and this was Carl Andre's piece. After my art history classes, my contemporary art history classes, I get some students in my truck and we'd drive down to this was set up on the foreshore park of UBC, right above Wreck Beach. And people that didn't like the work, and there were a lot of people that didn't like the work, would kick the blocks all over the place and wreck the line. So our job every day after class was to go down and put all the blocks in order again. Here's the sketch for this piece by Carl Andre. And I just show it to show, it's linked to my work. And that, I don't know whether I was directly influenced by Carl Andre or not. I think I knew him. I was in a heavy drinking bout with him in the fall of 1968 when I visited New York once. So I sort of knew him, probably at his worst, I'd say. But I really liked his work and still like his work. He has a major retrospective opening finally at the Dia Foundation in New York this May coming up. Another artist who I was really interested in but didn't know at this time yet was Dan Graham. And he was also interested in lines and seriality. That was one of the tropes of modernist art at the time. How am I doing for time? Yeah, I better move. This was done as a magazine piece. My wife was really interested in fashion magazines and collected Bazaar and Vogue magazine. And one of the editors of Bazaar magazine was really interested in the most cutting edge of contemporary art and conceptual art at the time, and invited these artists, including Robert Smithson, Dan Graham, etc., to contribute works to the magazine as interventions in the magazine. And this is a piece by Dan Graham called Figurative, which is kind of cheeky, isn't it? Kind of like playing on like shopping. He just took a shopping list and had it reproduced. I think it's a shopping list anyways. They're all... It's like a less than 50-cent store by the look of it. Another artist who's going to be coming here, and we're going to be having a conversation, is Victor Burgin. This is a really important work, I think, for me anyways in my work, by Victor Burgin, called Photopath. It was done I think it was originated in 1967. But this was a show that was included in the ICA London version of When Attitudes Become Form in the fall of 1969. I didn't make it to London until this fall of 1970, so I didn't see this show. But I did have the catalog, by the way. So I was aware in fall of 1969 of that. But I had begun my line pieces earlier, so I wouldn't say I was directly influenced by this work, but as soon as I saw it, I saw the potential that exists in photography to apply photography to the problems that I was dealing with in using other materials like wood, timber, etc. Just to explain this to you in case you can't identify what's happening, what this is are photographs of the same floor that are placed upon the floor. See, you can see I think there's 16 by 20 inch photographs all lined up in a long strip on the floor. I don't know whose feet these are up in the upper corner here. There's two guys standing side by side, probably Victor Burgin and Charles Harrison, who was the curator. An artist whose work piles from 1968, the summer of 1968, is Ian Baxter of Any Think Company. I keep saying Ian Baxter, even though Any Think Company, of course, was Elaine Baxter and Ian Baxter together. I always think of Ian Baxter because he was my teacher, so I had the closer contact and the closer relationship was to Ian Baxter. He did a kind of earthworks version using photography to look at what he saw as a kind of objects and events that exist in the everyday world. And this was a real key trigger to the opening up of photography as a material technique to use in this context. It was a catalog of, I think, about 100 photographs of just things that would be piles. Say, there's piles of this, that, and the other, donuts in a donut shop, et cetera, just all over Vancouver. And he did, in conjunction with this show, actual kind of like various, in fact, there's one in the traffic show downstairs of him pouring a can of white paint into a can of white paint in the ground. That's also from that same show that was associated with the piles. But Piles was really influential to me in seeing what could be done with photography. Another series of his works, this is a 1967 piece. He was into this it thing for a while. Not he and Elaine. I have to keep correcting myself there. Get it at Woodward's. And he's just kind of making jokes about kind of like phenomena out in the street, in the city, etc. Ian Baxter kind of was a pop conceptualist, I think of. My approach towards conceptual art was much more kind of trying to do a kind of political, social, more serious analysis of it, or at least what I thought was serious anyways. I wouldn't say categorically it was more serious than anything company's pop approach to the environment. In fact, you know, that's an interesting discussion. Dan Graham again, Homes for America, his kind of parodying of a real estate commentary, real estate journalism, and photographing kind of tract housing in the suburban cities of the eastern United States, in this case Staten Island. I think that's where he got most of these pictures from. Actually these are probably all been washed away by Hurricane Sandy, right? It was at that time, it was kind of this new kind of like repetitive tract housing that was happening in the eastern United States. And he was likening it to what was happening in minimal, in serial art and minimal sculpture. So the kind of the format of it was similar. Now in the spring, and we're talking all about events by artists outside and inside of Vancouver that are all happening at the same time, like folding over each other. So the influences aren't exactly linear. It was just something that was in the air and happening, and things were moving very fast for a lot of people in different directions. In the fall of 1969, actually late fall of 1969, Elvin Balkand again invited Tom Burrows, Jeff Wall, and myself and Dwayne London to do an exhibition in the UBC Fine Arts Gallery, which was done in January, February 1970. Jeff Wall produced his really well-known and incredible piece called Landscape Manual that involved using the camera to do kind of an automotive tour through the suburbs of Vancouver. You might say the dystopic zone of the suburbs outside the downtown. And then writing a commentary on the process of photographing the streets through the windows of his car and commenting on that at the same time as he's taking the photographs, and then doing it again using the previous photographs to comment on them and rephotograph it. So it was kind of a very self-reflexive kind of photography. Christos Dikiakos, likewise, this development of kind of what we may call like a location scouting style conceptual art, or conceptual art photographed from the inside of a car, just photographing usually the zones of Vancouver that had nothing very exciting happening in them, the dead zones, you might call it, or what Dennis Wheeler did in his review of our exhibition, call it the defeatured landscape, which is where that title came from. This is a piece, the photo information book by Christos Dikiakos from 1970. This is what is now False Creek. That's all housing and park now, where you see all the cars parked. This is Vancouver the way it was in 1970. Here's another photograph by Christos Dikiakos showing the Vancouver City Museum, and just a kind of a plowed lot at the time. Vancouver I still refer to as a frontier city, and we really see the raw edges of the frontier city right downtown in these photographs. I tended to focus on the downtown, but the tendency was to find these kind of dystopic zones or dead zones or defeatured landscapes. A lot of this came from the influence not just of Dan Graham, but of Robert Smithson again with glue pour. Of course, Christos Dikiakos got to know Robert Smithson through the glue pour. Here's a photograph of myself, by myself, done in 1969 as a part of this kind of car trip photography that is in my Melancholy de la Rue series that's in the exhibition here. And this is a new house in British Properties in West Vancouver. Small compared to the ones they build now, isn't it? As a part of this idea of linearity and traffic and things, I was really interested in traffic jams. So here's a traffic jam in fall 1969, showing a traffic jam going on to the causeway at Stanley Park. It hasn't changed much. And as a part of the photo show, really important exhibition that Ilias Pagonis and Christos Dikiakos did again in the UBC Student Union Building Gallery that they curated, which had, I think, one of the first exhibitions of conceptual art photography that included Robert Smithson's work, Ed Ruscha, and Ethan Company, including people like Christos Dikiakos, myself, Jeff Wall, etc. I did a photo book, which I since deconstructed, but you can still see in these photographs the staple marks. I just stapled all my little shabby little photographs into these transparent pages that you could see through the pages and kind of flip from one page to the other. And another traffic jam, this time in front of what is today a condo called the Cube, which was then the West Coast Transmission Building on Georgia Street, sorry. Again, with a traffic jam here. I'm in my beat-up truck here, and all the heavy traffic's going the other way, obviously leaving town after work. That's a crack in my windshield we see there. These ones were also included in my photo book. I can see the staple marks there. And these pictures were then deconstructed from that book and put in, and then put in internegs, and then blown up to the largest blow-ups that I could do at the time, which was only 30 by 40 inches, done by Dominion Blueprint at the time. I'm going to start moving a little more quickly. It's almost 8 o'clock. I hope. Are you wearying? Are you okay? So okay, I'll move a little faster. Yeah, these text pieces are. I won't try and explain those. They stand for themselves. My magazine piece. I started in fall of 1969. My magazine pieces. This is one from the spring, the May issue of Life magazine of 1970, which is one that featured the so-called Kent State Massacre, where the National Guard shot and killed 4 students that were protesting the Vietnam War. Of course, for myself, somebody involved with the university and just recently a student and very politicized myself, and having marched in anti-war marches in Vancouver, this was a kind of a very shocking event, and it was just a way that I could grasp the meaning of it again in a way that kind of incorporates the media, and that influence could have come from the Dan Graham pieces, like the figurative piece we saw earlier, where he did a piece with the magazine. People like Joseph Kasuth were also working with newspapers and magazines and publishing artworks in the magazines and newspapers. He did an exhibition here, etc. And I just organized them on the walls in a very, very, almost what I see as a format, very much like Carl Andre's metal floor pieces that were just grids of metal. You know, this grid of the trope of the grid was very popular then. Here's my schema for a magazine piece, which is in the exhibition. And really the simple, this came from an influence of Lawrence Weiner, who basically wrote instructions for his work to be carried out later on, basically, just simple statements. The cover and facing pages of a mass circulation of magazine attached to a wall in a given arrangement until exhausted by the format. And I always did this as really as one to not be sold as an artwork, but just to be a large painting exhibited as a painting concept. Here's the one that was exhibited at UBC Fine Arts Gallery in the spring of 1971, again curated by Christos Dikiakos, who curated what was the collage show, and it was, as I saw it, as a collage. Here's the letter I wrote. I was living in London at the time, so I never did actually see the show. It was all installed and put up by the curators of the show. I never saw it. And I never saw this one either. This one is in the traffic show downstairs, in a documentation anyways. It was done in Montreal by Gary Coward in the Sadie Bronfman Center in the spring of 1971. I never saw this either, and I never even saw the documentation until just recently. In any case, here's my letter to Christos Dikiakos with the, where my red, the red disappears. There's my, just a sketch for him to follow to lay the magazine piece out. Through the spring of 1970, I continued in my new studio, as we see here, to photograph what I saw, again, is really what I was photographing was the intersection marking, the rectangle of the intersection, which for me was an analog to my earlier monochrome paintings with the monochrome center and the painted border. But what I was interested in here and what I was trying to do was fold in, you might say, modernist formalist, constructed, structured frames of reference, you might say the abstract aspect of contemporary art at the time, with the use of photography to reflect real subject matter in the social environment. Now this, of course, happens as well in the magazine pieces, where the magazine pieces carry the social content, in other words, the image content, but they're organized in a formal way that it could be as abstract, as a Carl Andre piece, in effect. But what I've added is, in a sense, the social subject, which is for a young, relatively politicized individual like myself at the time, wanting to bring into the language of contemporary art a reference to social subject matter. And that has really guided and influenced my intersection of painting and photography ever since. That was and I've kind of held on to that. Now, I've gone through many phases, as you see from the show, of developing large-scale photography, using cinematic tropes, et cetera, and a number of formal tropes, using also monochrome painting combined with photography, et cetera. In 2007, I did a show at the Catriona Jeffries Gallery here in Vancouver, and I decided that I wanted to bring some of this earlier work into the foreground and link it to my most recent work. And here we see an installation of that 2007 show with a version of the White Line with a plank piece, the same one that's in the Vancouver Art Gallery here, with my monochrome paintings. These were the reconstructed monochrome paintings. There's that picture of the corner of Hastings and Seymour on the wall. My street reflections piece, a piece called Support Surface here, which is a more recent one. There's that last monochrome painting that I did that still exists, the orange one that I showed earlier, combined with more recent work, as we'll see. Now, what I'm going to do, okay, this is the watershed of the early work. Now, very, very quickly, I'm going to show what I've done since the show has gone up here. Part of one thing I also did when the show was, I started recuperating my earlier work, including a piece that was shot at the corner of 4th and Avenue in Elma, just showing a car receding into the distance with a very dark sky. Here's this show again, this piece again. What I did was scan not a photograph, not a very good photograph, and I didn't care if it was a good print or not. In fact, it has some wrinkles in it. You can't see it here. Scanned it and blew it up as an inkjet print. Now, here's a series of hotel pieces that I did just this last spring at the Hotel Lutetia in Paris after I exhibited the pictures we just saw. Sorry, I'm rushing a little bit, but I'm going to jump ahead to something more interesting in a second here. And here we see my photographs that were the ones that were scanned, actually, on my table, my pencil crayons, my monochrome drawings, which I continue to do from the 80s on, along with studies and sketches that I do when I'm traveling, as we'll see. Catalog of an exhibition that was done in Brussels just before I went to Paris and did this piece. I do work wherever I go in my travels. I'm always working in the hotel rooms, and that's where my hotel series, which is in the show, really comes from. It's like a collage of references to things that I'm involved with, and that is almost autobiographical, combined with abstract painting surfaces and color, almost as a framing motif. In these, we see here this red drawing. Here it is here. This is just a scan of it. And there's just a number of these drawings that I do. These drawings are quite rigorous. I think I'm going to change my format, but the thing is, in any given proportion shape, usually on this vertical format like we see here, I can fill in with any color, it's arbitrary what the color is, an area that only goes to any part of halfway across the field of the picture, with the right-hand field always being white, as you see in all these pictures. The configuration, if you can call it that, or the figuration is always on the left-hand side. It's kind of a very rigorous format. It really limits my options. But when I'm doing these drawings, and now I have probably a few hundred of them, they're all different. They all have a different feeling to them. But I think I've just about exhausted that format. So I'm probably going to move on to something else, as we'll see. move on a little bit. Here's a shot from that same hotel room, the Lutetia Hotel in Paris, right near the Bon Marché. The hotel was ferociously expensive. So I was hoping that I could do some work from this that I could sell to pay for the hotel, and which actually has happened, so I'm happy to say that. So this piece I shot down the intersection, just like a kind of format of work I've done before, just showing people crossing the street, and I did it in a series of 3. This was just done recently. Here's another recent picture. It's a bit of a joke picture, but it's a serious joke. It's called Painting Lines. I looked out of the window of my studio, which is just over in near the Olympic Village, right behind Mountain Equipment Co-op, and it's the parking lot of Mountain Equipment Co-op. And it was a Sunday, and some people have been brought in to draw new lines marking the parking spaces there. And I figured, oh, this is right up my alley. This is, here's my line, my white lines. So I photographed them, and I did this, double diptych piece with this, with these guys kind of very earnestly painting these white lines. And they did a really good job, I thought. And I really liked the way they lined up the cone markers, and they left their paint there, which is perfect, because that's what I like to show in my own work, the pot of paint and everything that's involved. And okay, that's that piece. I really like those. Also at this time, when I was in Montreal in last year, I got to go into Guido Molinari's studio. Of course, Guido Molinari passed away back in 2004. I got to go in his studio, and I got to get into his cleanup area at the back of the studio, not the front area, but the back area where the artist leaves the mess. And I got to photograph the messes of Guido Molinari, of which there's a set of 3 of them in the exhibition. These are 3 earlier ones that are not in the exhibition, just showing how he kind of rolled the paint off his rollers onto the wall as a way of cleaning the rollers. But I thought, wow, that's great. What a great way to reproduce a painter's marks in my non-gestural, very flat monochrome painting style. Here's the 3 that are actually in the exhibition here. I'm just going to, the last few minutes of my talk, if I can have 5 minutes more of your attention here. This is a very recent work. In fact, this slide was just taken a couple of days ago, showing these 3 new pieces on the wall. They were done on my last trip when I was in Paris, staying in a much cheaper hotel, my favorite super cheap hotel, the Hotel de Nice. But I was really pressed for time. And so I didn't have that kind of nice, relaxed time where I could, sort of meditate over a monochrome drawing. And that was, I had to do a work. I didn't want to come to Paris and not do a work in the hotel. And I only had a couple of hours, and I could tell the light was very, very, it was a kind of a rainy day. It was just in late November, November 26th, as a matter of fact. That's part of the title. And so I had a meeting with my gallerist, and I remember it was a good meeting, but I was just itching to rush out to get back to the hotel to get the last couple of hours of sunlight before I had to leave again that evening for London. So I was in a bit of a panic, and I don't like making art in a bit of a panic, but I thought a good piece came out of this panic moment. So let's see what you think. Here's the first shot I took. I just got my materials out. I travel in my suitcase with just a simple portfolio with some decent drawing paper, my pencil crayons, a ruler. I need a ruler because I can't draw a straight line. Glue and etc. On the corner here, we see a notepad from the hotel in London where I was before. On this notepad, I had in the bar there, I think probably over a Prosecco at the end of the afternoon, I was just doodling out possible compositions. Like, I was talking about breaking out of my compositions and shifting a little bit and creating these kind of pinwheel compositions. This is the one I selected at the top here. And here's the drawing of the composition. Okay, where to go from here? I took the back of the notepad off, and that gave me my proportions for the photograph. I drew the outline of the painted area, what would be the final painting to go around. This is like a study, right? I got my laissez-passer for the Pompidou Center from my wallet, and my Pompidou Center library card from my wallet, and a bit of a Post-it here. This kind of like set out the composition to mimic this composition here. So you can see the three elements. And I was just kind of trying it out to see how it felt. The next step was to actually draw it in and fill it in with color. And this is the third one of the set. And here's the actual drawing, as we see. Here's the actual interior of the room with, actually, this was shot on an earlier trip this spring. And here's my Guido Molinari sketches for the Guido Molinari series I just showed you. I just realized by coincidence it's on the bed. I just grabbed this picture of the room. Here's to show you. Here's the, in case you're interested, here's the outside of the hotel. This is the Hotel Denise. It's a very small, cheap hotel de charme. Very nice people run it. And there's the balcony up there. You can see the curlicues in the balcony that you see in the, and it's the Pompidou Center is just down the street. There's a market across the street. The Hotel de Ville, the main city hall, is right there, and the big department store, the Bazaar BHV, the Bazaar de Hotel de Ville is right down the street there. It's very central in the Marais. I like it. It's where I feel at home when I go there. Here's the sketch for this first one. There's the curlicues of the balcony you can see. And here's the finished painting, the next sketch, and the finished painting, and the next sketch, and the next finished painting. I structured it, as you see, so it goes from no composition and just tonal grays and black to a sketched out composition and a pastel version of color, and then a finished composition with the full colors of the red, yellow, and blue, slightly modulated tones. I didn't want to be too close to Mondrian. Close enough. One more piece I'm just going to show you that's currently right on the wall being painted. We see it right here. Currently in my studio. This was photographed yesterday. It's again another kind of experimental piece about like breaking out of my more rigid system of composition. These are outtakes from a shoot that I did for a crosswalk piece back in 2007, where I hired two models from a head sheet of a fashion model house and photographed them in the street. And I had I thought, some interesting photographs. And so I made a composition here using the three prints from the 3-1 to go on one large 60-inch by 90-inch. So it's it's as tall as this, bigger than the screen you see here, about the size of the screen, but on the vertical axis to do as a composition. And here's the picture. Sorry, they're a little bit fuzzy. This is Matthew McWilliam, Al McWilliam's son, who was helping me on the shoot, and I got him into the picture. He looks like the stalker in this case, or the odd man out following them or something. There's my two models crossing the street, and there he is. And I had them do, when I did the shoot, I had them do all kinds of other narrative gestures so that I could use these pictures in the future. And here they are lounging with Matthew standing on the side there. Now, what this all means, I don't know. It kind of adds up to some kind of narrative that's totally open as far as I'm concerned. And one level, it's a totally abstract composition. And another level, it's a narrative, a masculine, feminine narrative that, opens up certain kind of formats of reading, which I leave to the viewer to take anywhere they want. This is, again, this painting. It's just masked off to paint the red section in the composition. And this was photographed today. The red section is now finished, and it's masked off to paint the gray section. There's the red section, and there's the gray section up there. Okay, well, that's it. Sorry, that was a real race through, wasn't it? So thanks for your attention.
So we're going to take some questions from the audience, but I will ask for your patience, and we'll ask you to use the microphone because we are recording this talk and we want to preserve your questions as much as Ian's answers if possible. And I will be, as best of my ability, running over to the other room, but maybe if the other folks have a question, if they could come over here, that might make it a little easier too. So, but we'll start, if anyone is quick and ready, with a question from the audience. Well, I have a question. I was wondering, Ian, if you could, it's just me, still me.
Okay. The light is quite
If you
strong.
could speak a little bit more about the process that you use in mining your own work, or using your previous works in assemblage kind of fashion to kind of generate new works. I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about that.
well, part of it comes from the fact that, you know, I was an instructor in art history for almost 30 years. And the idea of kind of constantly making reference and speaking my own work through other artists' work and my own ideas through other artists' work, and I did that in my writing as well. When I'm writing about other people, I'm usually really talking about myself. So there's that influence of the idea that of making references. And then there's another thing, you know, if one can appropriate other artists' work into the work, you can also appropriate your own work into your work. And so really, in effect, without, in a sense, without showing disrespect for the integrity of any particular work I do, I always like to take it one step further to say, okay, I went this direction with this, but this can also be incorporated into that. So it's just, you know, it's a way of continuing the narrative and moving on, as I'm doing just like tonight. Like this is really kind of an image performance, in effect, that is kind of carrying on kind of a set of reference points through my work. And besides, it's kind of fun. I like to go back and recuperate work that I think maybe wasn't so interesting and put it in a context that I think is more interesting. Like that, I won't bore you with too many pictures, but there was some pictures back here I skipped through really quickly that I really like. Sorry, I hope you're not getting giddy from this, but these ones here. I photographed that earlier photograph of the car at 4th and Elma. It was a strangely dark, you know, those kind of stormy skies, and then the bright sun coming from the west, cutting in front. I just photographed this on my table in my studio, and then I took it and made an inkjet print out of it, as we see right here. So it's referred to there, but then there's the original. And so I just stepped back, and there's actually an inkjet printout of one of my hotel pieces with the same picture in it. And actually underneath it here, it looks like another one of the shot of the corner of Hastings and Seymour seen from my studio of 1970. So in these pictures are, in a sense, collage constellations of references that run through like current work, past work, future work, etc. And it's kind of writing. It's a kind of a poetry of the image, I guess, really. And they're very spontaneously done, too, by the way. Is there a question out there?
Yes, I have a question. Yeah, those I like those 3 pictures you had across a few minutes ago. One of them on the far left was gray, mostly gray background.
Mm-hmm.
I also,
Sorry.
yeah.
Okay, sorry. Okay, there we are.
Left.
I'll stay there. I won't touch that thing again, I promise.
Yeah, those other, I don't know, with those bright colors and some of your work seems to kind of unsettle me. Like, do you have any comment about that? I mean,
well, I'd like to say that's good, the unsettled, because one thing that can happen is that it can be, one thing that can happen is that they can be too, well, I'm not against the word decorative, actually. I've got nothing against decorativeness. Like a vase of flowers to me is decorative and it's absolutely beautiful, and that's fine by me. And I try to do that in my own work. You know, like to have, in fact, this series, you know what, one thing I like about it? It's kind of nice and light. L-I-T-E, light. You know, it doesn't have to be too heavy and serious. And in the end, it's just formal anyways. You know, it's just like you know, putting together things. But it's not about anything else ultimately except what it is to put something together as an image and have it work. I hope it works for you, even if it unsettles you. But I agree with you. There's, you know, if there's something unsettling about it, I hope that's good. Is it a good feeling of unsettlement? I don't know.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. I like the one on the left, and I like the ones with the grading picture with the pencils on the table. I thought that was very meditative and relaxing, and I could look at it for quite a long time.
Yeah. And the center one, the pastels, you have problems with? Pastel is hard to do. It's really hard to do pastel, especially pink is one of the hardest colors to do. But I use it occasionally. There is a piece downstairs with a lot of pastel that's based upon Post-its that I used in the composition. And I borrowed the colors from Post-its. You know, you get the pink Post-its and the green Post-its and the yellow Post-its and gray Post-its. And those colors can be unsettling. Yeah.
The middle one's starting to grow on me a bit more now.
Oh, good. It was just a way for me to move through a series with the same, approximate same, I don't know if you look closely, you'll see that the composition isn't identical in each one. There's a slightest shift. But all of them, the outside borders are even, like they're locked in, but they're loose and shifting at the same time. That's what I'm trying. It's like, you know, how to be rigorously formal and loose at the same time. You know, I think it's kind of like dancing or something, isn't it?
We have another question over here.
Do you consider yourself to be a painter? And if so, why or why not?
Yeah, I think of myself as a painter using whatever materials are there to create what has been traditionally understood as a painting. I don't know exactly where the voice is familiar, but I don't exactly know where that question is coming from. But yeah, I consider myself a painter, and I consider myself a painter more than a photographer per se, even though I can be called a photographer too. Yes, I'm very, in fact, what is conservative in my work is that I'm still wrestling with unresolved issues of early modern art and the collapse of painting in the early 20th century. I'm still kind of working some of those things out. I think there's still, you know, in abstract painting, there's still some very, very important aspects of what abstract painting represents that I'm trying to recuperate for the future as a language to use. And so that's why, and it's difficult, because it ends up only being, well, that thing with patches of color or whatever. But it's also more than that, as we know. And photography is a way of impregnating that purely formal relationship of abstract painting with that social subject matter, that it's its antipode, you might say.
You talked about seriality in your work and in other work and minimalist. And I'm wondering, especially with the three images that are on the screen, they work together so well, in my opinion, as a group. And I think going through your show and seeing similar work side by side is really illuminating. But I presume that that's not a triptych, that those are individual paintings. And can you just talk about that?
No, this is one piece.
It is one piece.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's always been a problem with me. I'm a stutterer, a visual stutterer, in effect, you know. I could do one thing, and then there's another one, and another one, another one, another one come up, and then it all holds together so rationally, because I'm a Virgo, it's sort of a bit rational, that in the end, I'm stuck with this big piece, right, that I wished was smaller. But I can't break this up. It just makes too much sense as a group, as you said, and I've run into that with many other works. And as a result, I have a lot of unsold work in my studio in crates. But that's the way it is. You know, if it makes sense that it has to stick together, then it's got to stick together. I'm trying to think of a way to do really small works. In fact, my drawings and studies and the monochrome drawings, eventually they're going to be brought out and featured. I'm interested in that, of working at a much more small kind of pocket-sized level, like a mini iPad level, you know.
We have another question back here.
Hi. This is relating to what you just said about you're struggling with things from the past that you're reworking now and not really sure where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at this triptych, in my mind, when you read left to right, which is sort of that's how we sort of look at things,
Mm-hmm.
and I see the dull and the light, and then I see Mondrian.
Mm-hmm.
And you were
Yeah.
saying, well, you changed the color of it just slightly to not give 100% nod to Mondrian, but it's an obvious thing. It seems to me that is that the final? Is that the gray one, it's not quite there? slight color from the middle one not quite there, and then
Yeah.
you've got it?
Yeah.
Or am I not to read it right to left to right?
No, it's reading from left to right. Yes, there is a narrative. There is a time flow and a flow of process and a flow of decisions that went. And as I said, I did this in a very spontaneous panic, and I didn't really know what I was going to do when I started out. And that's, as I said, it triggered off from the little drawing, and that gave me my motif. And then what do you do with it, right? So, and then each stage of it, I had my camera at the ready and photographing it, which I tend to do. And that's kind of really self-reflexive in effect. You're making work out of the actual narrative process of making the work itself. What Robert Morris did, the box with the sound of its own making, it's a common trope of modernist art, even conceptual modernist art, to constantly make reference to what the actual problematics of making a work are all about. In fact, that's what this is. But as I said, this felt light to me. And partly why I like this work is that at the end of it, I felt, I might be wrong, I mean, you can have another opinion about it. You can think it's really a facile work, and you can make a good argument for that. But I was so relieved I got something and something that was cogent and made sense, and I saw how it could be finished off. All this happened within about 20 minutes, and it was done. I really like making art like that. It's not the best way to make art, and it's not the best way to make good art, but at certain times when you have that impulse and you got to do it, that's what you do. And if it works out, you feel really good about it. It doesn't always work out, of course, and you toss it. And this I feel good about this one. I think it worked. But I definitely respect any other opinion about it, whether the color unsettles you or it makes you feel nauseous or is just like totally nothing or trivial. I mean, it's anybody's take from there. This, as I said, this work is just fresh out of the studio. It's photographed in my studio wall and just completed. And before that's completed, I'm already on to the next one, as you know. And
Hi. You use the word rigor a lot, and I can see that your processing is incredibly rigorous. Is that a natural trait, or do you fight to be rigorous in your art? Are you rigorous in other areas of your life?
I hope so. I wouldn't say it publicly that I wasn't, but yeah, we all have our failings. Sometimes I feel really lazy, and sometimes I reach for the easy solution. But I must say, I think it's important, once my work goes on into public, to take responsibility for it. So a work does not leave my studio as a work of art with my signature on it unless I feel confident that that's a serious, rigorous work of art. In other words, it can pass the test of time, it can pass the test of criticism, of likes and dislikes, of discussion, and all, as much as possible. Nothing is absolutely guaranteed, about that. But from my point of view, those are the demands I set on myself. That even if the work in this case is what I call light, in the sense of L-I-T-E, in other words, not onerous, morbid, or concerned with serious issues, and there are serious issues that an artist can be concerned with, this is not one of those works. This is the work that you do to be rigorous about what it is to make a work, but to relax a little bit in your ambitions as to what a work can be about. Maybe that's one way to put it. Yes, I respect and I search for rigor in work. I mean, in the sense that there's something that's going to challenge my assumptions about things, that's going to set a standard that kind of raises the bar on what future artists can attain to. This is what we try to do. Just to have a career by repeating good things is not very interesting. You're always moving forward and struggling to do that. Another thing I always say is an artist only has really 2 or 3 good ideas in their lifetime. And the thing is, how do you make a work last for a lifetime with those 2 or 3 ideas? They have to be really solidly founded, and that requires a lot of work, a lot of rigor, a lot of thinking, a lot of commitment, a lot of serious looking at other art and what art is and discussion. And I'm lucky. I've had that here in Vancouver with my students, with my colleagues, with other artists, with friends. It's just an amazing level of discourse that's around us that allowed me to achieve what I think I've achieved. And I don't think I'm the greatest artist in the world, but I've done some pretty good pieces, you know, that I think will stand the test of time. And I hope, you know, the teen group that I took through the gallery through my show a while ago, I think some of them will remember the work, and maybe do something with their experience of that in the future. That for me is the ultimate reward, the legacy, you might say, right? Sorry, I've wandered off a little bit on that question.
Hi. How does this work? Okay. I'd like to pull your slides together, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. The very first picture that you showed of the photo of the intersection in front of your studio, the remark you made was that the stripe, the crossing square, was what you were actually interested in. And I'm finding that this piece compared to your the one we last had up with the 3 series, are very interesting, because in this picture it looks like you're saying, okay, I'm interested in the square, and there happens to be some reality happening in that square. Mm-hmm. Now that square is taking place inside of another square, which is the viewfinder of your camera.
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
Okay. Now in the last 3, your most recent pieces, you have squares outside of the photo, and the photo is now the reality, but you've created the square. So in other words, if I took a white paint and painted the outside of this square right here,
Mm-hmm.
it would be in effect what you're doing in your triptych at the very end. Mm-hmm. Can I see the triptych at the very end as also? Here's what I find fascinating and very interesting, is that what happens in the way that you've edited with first the gray, then the pastel, and then the primary colors, is the edit describes the dimensions of the picture. You notice the window sash is lined up with your gray in the very left. In the middle, it's literally in the middle. It's almost like it's floating, and in the end, it's at the end of the red square. And what I'm finding when I look at it is, like the picture that you first showed of the intersection, is my eye is being told or being brought to attention what to see. In the very left hand, I tend to see the tonalities of your room picture. In the middle one, I tend to see the pastels in the actual reality. In the one on the very right, I pick up on all the really bright. And it's almost like the viewfinder that you initially employed is now a viewfinder that you're adding another dimension to it, and you're saying the same thing, i.e. this is my hotel room, but you're saying it in 3 different ways in the way that you've edited with the color.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope you write art criticism, by the way. That's very well observed, really. And these kinds of observations, in fact, are what I'm looking at and considering and observing when I'm trying to make sense out of a situation that is a fairly open situation. It's just working in, you know, a hotel room and pulling things together that I just happen to have in my pocket or, you know, on the table to make something out of it. It's like making something out of nothing in a way. So that's, you know, those are the kinds of things that come in there. That photograph of the intersection is the same way. I said to myself, and it's my studio, I said, like, there's my art material. It's down in the street. So, you know, I go down in the street to photograph. Those are my colors, and those are my shapes and forms. And so I just reproduce it in a photograph. Here, it's a bit of, you know, I brought back the painting issues back. I hope that in the future you get to see, and you're welcome to come to visit my studio to see them, by the way, since you're such a close observer, to see the actual work, because there's a lot of texture and a lot of visual grip and detail that exists in the image itself and in the paint and the reticulation of the weave of the canvas that's shown through the paint. I take all those things into account. You know, like materiality. In other words, the means that we have to speak with are as important as what we say. What Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message that he said, you know. And that's a modernist trope. But it makes viewing and looking at something more meaningful and very pleasurable in terms of its sensuousness. Like there's a grain to it. Unfortunately, we can't see it on a projected image like this. But if you see the original works, and they're 4 feet high by 3 feet wide, by the way, so they're not huge, but a decent size. Thank you for your comment.
Do we have one last question out there?
Hi, I'm really interested in your cinema stills, and you don't really talk about it. So what do you think about cinema in relation to photography, painting?
Well, I've written quite a bit about the relation of cinema to painting. One of the reasons we have abstract painting is because at the turn of the 20th century, when cinema came in, it basically took over the function of representation that large-scale painting had previous to that, and also melodramatic theater. Cinema is like the conflation of melodramatic theater on the stage with the image and history painting, for the most part, large-scale figurative narrative painting. So cinema has that historical relationship to it, which is, basically, gained the audience that used to go to the 19th century salons to see large-scale painting on the wall. But of course, filmmakers are also very sensitive to the kinds of issues, especially modernist filmmakers, and one of my favorites, Jean-Luc Godard, especially in his earlier films, but many, many other filmmakers as well, very, very sensitive as filmmakers to what it is to make a film. In other words, the actual, not just the technical apparatus, but the sensuousness of the screen and the filmic image with action, narrativity, movement, etc., that all goes up to make what a picture is all about. And contemporary artists today have an incredible challenge and a real job to do something that can, in a sense, engage the audience the way cinema does. It's just, it's difficult, but contemporary art, through its questioning of things in a different way, bringing an abstraction, has, in a sense, attracted questions that the audience brings to the work in a different way, but in very strong competition with film, and is just as important as film. I don't know if that fully answers your question. I've used cinema images in my own work. I've produced work from my own film stills. In my work, I tend to use the idea of the film still more than the moving film, per se. And I've always wanted to direct and make a film. When I saw Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless when I was in high school in about 1960 at UBC, it was projected in a film club at UBC 1 year after it came out. I was totally inspired and said, if this guy can make this film, I can make one too. As it was, I just didn't have the talent or the organizational ability or the storytelling ability to make that film. But I think, my artwork through my life has been my film fragments, if you want to say, that kind of replicates a bit of my ambitions from that time. Okay.
Thanks, Ian. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming and welcome you to join us again in 2 weeks when we have a conversation between Ian and Christine Poggi. And with that, we'll wrap it up. We'll thank Ian for being here.
Yeah. Christine Poggi, by the way, can I interject just? Christine Poggi is a very important art historian who has written excellent books. Mostly her specialty is on data, cubist, and futurist collage work. Teaches in the art history department in University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And I invited her because I was really impressed by her book called In Defiance of Painting, which is about collage work, in which collage is very important. In fact, these are collages, if nothing else. And invited her to contribute an essay to my catalog, which she kindly did so, and she's coming to talk. I've never met her personally yet, so it's going to be an interesting evening. So do come.
Well, we look forward to seeing you there. Thank
Sorry,
you.
Al. Thank you.